So you got a piece of property, you need to get it surveyed. I got some tips for you. I got some ideals. I got some thoughts. It's not 10 tips. It's not 5 tips to share. No tricks. No, I'm just going to throw them at you. I got a few things I want to share. I had some questions about this. Had another viewer ask me a question about, surveys and pricing and stuff like that. So let's talk about surveys as far as property surveys, hiring a surveyor to go out and survey a piece of real estate. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. Um, so when you sell a property or buy a property, a lot of times there's a survey involved. So you call them up, and the prices can be all over the place depending on how big the property is, what structures are on the property, how accessible it is. There's a lot of things that come into play, and I think the pricing just kind of depends on all those things combined, plus the availability of surveyors in your area, their workload, things like that. So in my particular area, when I'm getting a survey done, and I've had, I don't even know how many of them done, and I've looked at them. Sometimes you buy it and the previous owner had a survey and they still have it and they give it to you. Or if not, you might ask for it, and that might save you right off the bat. Like, hey, do you have a survey? And they may have it. It may be 10 years old, 20 years old. I've seen some of them really old where looks like it was hand drawn and hand written out, but the points are still there as far as the corners and stuff like that. So if nothing else, you could give that survey to a surveyor today, and it may help them. It may lessen the price if they see that it's already been surveyed in some parts. I've seen them where a farm, it's just never been surveyed, really professionally done, for 100 years or whatever, and so it just really depends. But in my experience, in an area where there's real estate transactions going on, it's not that difficult to get one. And the best thing to do is, if there's a couple of survey companies, surveyors in your area, call around. You may need the legal description of the property and just some basic knowledge, like, hey, there's a house on there, or it's vacant land, or there's a house with a detached garage and a swimming pool, and it's all fenced off, so that, it's a pretty, cut and dry thing. And they may tell you, well, we'll call you back with a quote, or we'll email you a quote, or, to do a survey in that neighborhood, it's $400, or $500, and it's going to take us 2 weeks, 3 weeks. We can be out there tomorrow morning. Just, call around, talk to people. That's the best thing to do 90% of the time, is call a couple different survey companies and just see what they have to say about it. That's what they're doing all day long. A lot of people are intimidated to approach these folks when those folks may be sitting around saying, man, nobody's calling me, and that's what they talk about. Same thing goes for real estate attorneys, or, all these professionals that sometimes are involved in, or a lot of times are involved in these transactions. Give them a call, pick their brain, tell them what you got going on, or, tell them what you're thinking about doing, and see if they have any questions for you, or, things that you didn't think about, and you can shoot some questions at them, and just go from there, and see what you learned, because, I had one, and it was like a rectangle piece of land, nothing crazy. And the surveyor that I normally use was like 3 or 4 weeks, maybe 5 weeks. It was going to be a long time before they could get the survey done. And it was just longer than I wanted to wait. So I called another surveyor in a neighboring county, and they wanted to charge me over $1,000. I want to say like $1,200 or $1,500 to survey this property, and they could get out there within a week or two, compared to 4, 5, 6 weeks as the other one. But the other one was going to charge me like $300 or $200 to do it. So you can have that big of a spread of a variance in pricing. And if you don't call around, if the one that you called first was $1,200, that might have been it. And sometimes it may be like a surveying company that, they have a whole office of surveyors and a lot of overhead, and they got a building to pay for, a lease, a mortgage, a fleet of trucks, a lot of surveying equipment, health insurance for all their employees, stuff like that. So they got to put that into the cost of a survey. Or you may find somebody that, is just a one-man operation, one lady out there with her surveying equipment, knows what they're doing. And, two, three, $400 for a survey, most of that money's going in their pocket. And so where they can get away and be profitable charging $300 or $400, somebody else may need to charge $1,000 or $1,200 just to cover their expenses of their business. So that's where it really pays just to call around or call some real estate agents that operate in that area, because they're doing surveys all the time in some form or fashion. They're involved with it. They've got clients ordering surveys. They know who's quick. They know who's far out. They know who does quality work. They know who's cheap, expensive, whatever. So call a real estate agent and say, well, give me the name of two or three of them. Who would you recommend? And go from there, and then call those surveyors themselves, and that there you go. So, and all it does, it's going to mark the corners, and you're going to want to know, because wild things can show up in a survey, that you wouldn't even think. I've heard stories. I haven't really had too many myself. I've had a couple minor things pop up, but I've heard them where, they thought they owned the house, and the house was actually on the neighbor's property. And this one just, I heard it through the grapevine type thing. I mean, this is a neighborhood that I do business in, and that I bought a lot of property in this neighborhood. And the real estate agent had the survey, encouraged his client to get the survey, and the client originally did not want to pay. I think it was $400 or $500 for a survey probably, and the client originally didn't want to pay for it. Said, no, it's all good. It's just a 2-3 square lots, with a house on it. What's the big deal? And said, well, you may just want to get the survey. And so he ended up going ahead and paying for the survey and bit the bullet. Well, by the time he got the survey back, the house that he thought he was buying was on the neighbor's property. It was just vacant land, but it was owned by somebody else. And that house was only 10 feet of it was on the property that he was actually buying, and the rest of the house was on the neighbor's land. So that's the kind of crazy stuff. It's a $200-something-thousand house that he didn't want to pay the $500 or $400 for the survey. Well, it could save you in the end, So, and I've seen, that's kind of an extreme example, but the stories are out there. So, and that's kind of what you want. Ask them too. I've seen it where I had one that I bought, and I saw the survey flags were out there. So I asked the lady I was buying it from, well, I see the survey markers. Do you have a survey that I could see? And she said, yeah, I got it, and I paid them $350 for it. I just need to find out where it is, and a week or so went by, and she said, I haven't been able to find it. And I called the survey company, and they said, well, for that, all that I ordered was a survey and a staking, but not the actual drawing. So she got the four corners of her property. It was just a rectangle lot, 2 lots, and she got 4 corners of it marked, just the boundary lines of the property, and that was it. And they said, well, you didn't want or didn't pay. Anyway, there was some miscommunication there where she didn't actually get the drawing piece of paper with the legal description, the drawing outline of the lots and stuff like that. She just got it marked to where she could look at it and see where it was. So I ended up having to pay for a new survey on this property, and it was another $450, I think, is what I paid, and that came with a drawing, and they went back out and staked the property again. So that's kind of what you're looking at. So if you need the drawing, make sure you specify that, and if you just want it marked, then specify that as well. I've seen it where 2 neighbors are wondering where my property ends and where yours begins, so you can just get 1 or 2 spots, the property line marked. There's a lot of things that they can do. So keep that in mind when you're ordering the survey, or just ask them, what am I getting for this $1,000 or $500 or $2,000? I've paid for surveys that were a couple $1,000. I paid for them that were a couple $100. So just, be clear on what you're getting for whatever you're paying, and that may be the difference between, well, this guy quoted me 300 and this one quoted me 1,000. Well, what's the difference here? And it may maybe the same thing, but you want to be sure of that before you pay the money and end up with something else that you didn't think you were getting, or, be clear on what you're getting for that money. And that's what I recommend as far as surveys, tips, tricks. That's what I came up with, and that's kind of what I look for when I'm ordering a survey, getting a property surveyed. And I use it a lot in my subdividing of lots and acreage and stuff like that. Those are the ones that normally end up being a couple $1,000s. But, it's something, especially in real estate investing or selling or buying, it's kind of a form of insurance or peace of mind, just knowing what you got, where it's at, any encroachments, any things like that. So good idea to get them. That's what they're used for. The prices are kind of all over the place, but it doesn't hurt to call around and get some advice on, pricing and what you're getting, the scope of work in those. So call some surveyors, call some real estate agents, maybe even title companies and let you know who's doing surveys around there and more specifics on your area. So appreciate you watching the video. Subscribe, like, comment, let me know what you think. Any survey stories, drop them in the comments description below. Appreciate everything.